Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing good. So in my today's session, I'm going to explain about the concept of managed identities in Azure. Okay, so let's begin with it. So what are managed identities in Azure? Managed identity is a concept like service accounts, which we used to do in our on-premises systems. Okay, an identity is configured in a Microsoft Entra ID or Azure Active Directory and used to access the resource. Okay, a managed identity enables Azure resources to authenticate to other cloud services like it may be Azure keywords, storage accounts, some graph APIs or other APIs, etc., without needing to store, manage, or rotate credentials. Okay, so that is the definition of managed identity. So if I explain in simple terms, managed identities are uh, basically the concept of service accounts which we used to use in our on-premises systems, where we used to store those service accounts credentials in order to make one service to another service communication to happen basically. Okay, so one service used to authenticate another service in order to access it. So same concept applies on the Azure also, guys. Okay, you are developing, for example, you are developing an application or a service. If that service wants to make use of some other resources on your Azure, they have to authenticate to each other. Okay, you can make use of, okay, the credentials basically, or the API keys which are provided by various Azure services. For example, one such example is storage accounts. Storage accounts provides the notion of access keys, basically secure access keys, but again it comes with a trouble, okay, or a responsibility of storing that credential or a access key in a secure way or in a secure place. If it is compromised, basically you will end up in compromising providing all the high level accesses or privileged access to storage accounts in order to perform all read write operations, which is a risk, right, guys? So in order to avoid that, Microsoft Entra ID introduces this concept of managed identities. Okay, so you are not required to maintain anything from your side. Everything happens on the cloud itself. Okay, it's completely the cloud provider's responsibility to manage these identities. That's why the name managed identities. Okay, so one such example I would like to show you. For example, you have created a Azure Logic app. Okay, okay. There's a developer called Alice who has created an Azure Logic app. This is an Azure resource basically. Now, in order for this Azure resource called a Logic app to access another Azure resource called Azure Storage account, it can't directly access this storage account. Either this particular application should have the storage account keys in order to perform read write operations or management operations on the storage account, which I already said. For that you have to maintain those storage account keys and you have to keep it into the Azure keyword. Okay, or any other services or any other place where you can keep it very securely. Okay, now that is one way. What is the other way, the best way? Okay, what you have to do is, in order for this Logic app to access this storage account, what you are going to do is basically you create a managed identity on Azure or the Microsoft Entra ID. Okay, and on that managed identity basically you set the role permissions. Okay, so you have created a managed identity. Okay, so you have configured that managed identity on Logic app, whether it's a system assigned managed identity or user assigned managed identity. Again, there are two types. Okay, so you basically create a managed identity, you set up it on your Logic application, then the same managed identity you basically use it on storage account in order to perform role based access control, so that this particular managed identity, what all operations it can perform on this storage account. Okay, if your purpose is to just read the blobs, then you can just provide the read permission. Okay, the reader permission. Okay, and the code which executed on this Logic app only has the reader permission, and the Alice, the developer who is running some code from this Logic app, can only have the read access permission. Okay, so that is an high level introduction to managed identities. Okay, another good example to explain this is, suppose you have a garage. Okay, so you have a garage basically and you have your car. Okay, okay, what are the various ways through which you can basically, okay, open the door and park your car? Okay, so let me explain. First thing, you will be having keys to your garage shutter. You will go there. Okay, you use the keys. Basically the first approach is, let me say, keys. The first approach I would say, yeah, first approach is you will make use of key, key to your garage. Okay, you take that key, this particular key. Okay, you open, you lift the shutter up. Okay, and then you park your car. Okay, completely manual. Okay, now what could be the second approach? Suppose in the second approach, inside your car, whatever mirror you have, which you use to see the backside of your car. Okay, on that mirror you have a button. Basically now that button is embedded into your car itself inside. So when you click on that button, the garage shutter will automatically open. Okay, and you will park your car. Okay, say mirror button. Okay, okay guys, so there is an embedded button which you have put into your car's mirror, so that whenever you come to your garage, you click on that button. Okay, so the shutter will automatically open and you will park your car inside the garage. Again, that button can't be detached from the car. So here, this is called system assigned managed identity. I'm soon going to explain what are the various types of managed identities. There are basically two: system assigned and user assigned identities. Okay, so key is basically a complete manual process. You take key, you open the garage shutter and you park the car. Second approach is mirror button or some embedded button inside your car only, which can't be detached from your car. You just press that button and the garage shutter will open. You park the car. Okay, somehow it is automatic, but it is completely attached to your vehicle. Okay, you can't detach it. Okay, that's why the lifetime of that button or this mirror button is associated with your car only. You can't detach it. It's completely with your car. If you are planning to sell your car, the button will also go with the car itself. Okay, so this is called system assigned managed identity. Using this particular identity which is there on your mirror button inside car, you access your garage. Garage is your protected resource or secured resource. Okay, now the third approach is a remote control. Okay, basically you have a remote control, a handheld device. You click on that button, the shutter will open and you park the car. And this remote is not at all embedded or strongly attached to your car. You can basically carry it wherever you want inside your house and you can open it. So this kind of access or identity is called as user assigned managed identity, because user handle it and this particular remote control is with the user only. Okay, so just to understand the concept of managed identity, okay, I'm taking this example. Okay, key is completely a manual process where you are basically, if you basically correlate this garage to a Azure storage account or a Azure key vault, then these keys are basically the access keys which are provided by Azure. In case of storage account, you will be provided with Azure storage account keys, okay, which are used to access the your garage or your storage account. Now the problem comes is you have to keep these keys very securely. If you lost this key, you can't access this garage, and if this keys goes into someone else's hand, then they can misuse it basically, right? There's a security threat. Another option is mirror button, which is inside your car, pretty secure. Okay, it is always with your car only. You press on that button and you will be able to park it. So the lifespan of this particular option, which is system assigned managed identity, what I would call, is associated with your Azure resource only. Okay, so if I take the example over here, okay, the logic app is basically your car and your storage account is basically your garage, okay, or garage, and your managed identity is any one of these. Okay, sorry, any two of these. Key is a manual process, forget about it. Okay, your mirror button is a system assigned managed identity, whereas your remote control is user assigned managed identity. Okay guys, so this is how things work with managed identities. Okay, and with the remote control, you can, it's a handheld device, you can carry it with yourself and it is not at all attached to your or embedded into your car. So even if you sell your car, you will be able to use this remote control to open and close your garage and park your cars. Okay, so that's a simple notion associated with managed identities. Okay, now what are the advantages? You don't need to manage credentials, as I already explained in my previous explanation. Okay, you are not required to manage any credentials. Credentials aren't even accessible to you. Okay, With the managed identities, it's completely the Azure's responsibility, or I would say Microsoft Entra ID's responsibility. Okay, and it never gives you those credentials. Okay, it automatically manages everything for you. You can use managed identities to authenticate to any resource. Okay, that supports Microsoft Entra ID authentication, including your own applications. Yes, for example, a Logic app, your own API, okay, whatever kind of application. If it supports Microsoft Entra ID based authentication, then yes, okay, you can very easily access other resources using this managed identity notion. Okay, managed identities can be used at no cost. One important factor, okay, in order to use managed identities on Microsoft Azure, you are not required to pay any extra cost. It's free. Okay, so these are the advantages which managed identities bring basically. Okay, so you are not required to manage any credentials. You are free of credentials, and this particular hero or heroine over here, okay, this person will take care of doing that thing for you. Okay, and that too for free of cost. So you can use managed identities by following the below steps. Okay, I will tell you what are the steps involved over here. First of all, create a managed identity in Azure. The first step is creating a managed identity. Again, there are a lot of videos available, content is available on internet. You can see how to create a managed identity. Okay, either it can be system assigned or user assigned. Okay, the first step is create a managed identity in Azure. You can choose between any one of them. Okay, now second step is authorize the managed identity to have access to the target service. Okay, first you have to authorize your managed identity to the target service. In this case, okay, the Logic app wants to access storage account. This is my target service. Now I have to authorize my managed identity to this storage account. Very simple. Go to rules, and you need to go to the this one, access policy IAM blade in your Azure portal. There you simply make a role assignment to this particular managed identity. I'm going to explain this on my upcoming videos. This is just an introductory. Okay. Then, what is the third step? Use a managed identity to access a resource. In this step, you can use the Azure SDK with Azure.identity library. Okay. So you will basically make use of the code library provided by Azure in order to make access. So basically, this Logic app over here, which is running some code, will be making use of this Azure.identity library in order to access your storage account. Okay, basically involves setting up a blob container client in this case, and there you pass a default Azure credentials. Okay, and you in case of user assigned managed identity, you just pass that user principal ID name. In case of system assigned managed identity, you are not required to do anything. So default Azure credentials, and it will understand what to use. Okay, so that's it, very simple. Okay, now as I already told, there are two types of managed identities. Now I'm going to explain, okay, how they differ. Okay, first of all, the creation property. Okay, created as part of an Azure resource, for example, Azure Virtual Machines or Azure App Service. Okay, a system assigned managed identity is created as part of the resource itself. Okay, so if I create a Logic app, okay, and if I set up the identity using the system assigned managed identity over here, then it will be created as part of this resource itself. Okay, and its life cycle is tied to that resource itself, for example, the Azure Key Vault or a Logic app. Okay, whereas in case of user assigned managed identity, it's like a remote control. It's like buying a remote control. You create a user assigned managed identity, it's created as a standalone resource. Okay, it is not attached to any Azure resource. Basically, it's an independent resource. Okay, independent identity. Life cycle: shared life cycle with the Azure resource that the managed identity is created with. Okay, when the parent resource is deleted, the managed identity is also deleted. Always remember this. Okay, this particular system assigned managed identity is tightly coupled with your resource against which you have created. If you delete that resource, for example, a Logic app or an app service, then that system assigned managed identity is also deleted automatically. Okay, but in case of user assigned managed identity, okay, the identity, the it is basically independent of the life cycle of your resource for which you created, and it must be explicitly deleted. Okay, sharing across resources, yes, system assigned managed identity cannot be shared across resources. It can only be associated with a single Azure resource. If I'm creating a system assigned managed identity for my logic app, okay, it can only be used with the logic app to gain accesses to protected resources. It can't be used with any other Azure resources. Like if I have app service over here, okay, then I can't make use of the system assigned managed identity to that app service. No, it is tightly coupled with the logic app itself. Okay, do remember this point. Whereas user assigned managed identities can be shared because they are independent resources. The same user assigned managed identity can be associated with more than one Azure resource. For example, if I'm using here user assigned managed identity, then the same identity I can use for a Azure app service, okay, and you can basically make use of it for a Kubernetes cluster, a pod, a kind of any kind of resource, okay, a signal or whatever you want to use. You can basically make use of that user assigned managed identity. So it can be used with multiple resources. Okay, now common use cases. The workloads contained within a single Azure resource. Okay, system assigned managed identity can be used where workloads contained within a single Azure resource, workloads needing independent identities, where your workload requires an independent identity. Okay, it should not be shared across multiple resources. Okay, one such example is an application that runs on a single virtual machine. In such cases, you can go with system assigned managed identity. Whereas user assigned managed identity, workloads that run on multiple resources and can share a single identity. Okay, workloads which are running on multiple resources, okay, and can share a single identity. Workloads needing pre-authorization to a secure resource, okay, as a part of provisioning a flow. Okay, there is also scenarios where you are required to provide, you need to provide a pre-authorization to a secure resource. Okay, workloads where resources are recycled frequently. Okay, workloads where resources are recycled frequently means created deleted frequently, but permission should stay consistent. In such cases, you can go with user assigned managed identity. For example, a workload where multiple virtual machines need to access the same resource. Okay, one such example over here. Okay guys, so that's it about the differences. Now scenario wise I would like to explain. Let's start with the scenarios. Okay, now I would like to put more highlight on the usage on these two types of user managed identities. Which one will fit good for what scenario? Okay, so first scenario is a rapid creation of resources. For example, ephemeral computing. Okay, with managed identities. Okay, rapid creation of resources. If you attempt to create multiple managed identities in a short space of time, basically, okay, if you attempt to create multiple managed identities in a short space of time, for example deploying multiple virtual machines each with their own system assigned identity, you may exceed the rate limit for Microsoft Entra object creations, and the request will fail with an HTTP 429 error. Okay, so this is one such scenario. Okay, where you can't make use of system assigned managed identities. If resources are being created or deleted rapidly, you may also exceed the limit on the number of resources in Microsoft Entra ID if using system assigned identities. While a deleted system assigned identity is no longer accessible by any resource, it will count towards your limit until fully purged after 30 days. Okay, so deploying the resources associated with a single user assigned identity will require the creation of only one service principal in Microsoft Entra ID. Okay, so in order to overcome these above scenarios, for example, you have a ARM template, Azure Resource Manager template, which basically provisions a n number of resources, okay, over a short period of time. Okay, and during that period of time, if you are exceeding the rate quota limit of the Microsoft Entra ID, okay, every API services have a rate quota specified guide. For this particular second, you can create only these many number of objects. So if during that specific period of time, if you exceed the rate quota limit, then your resource creation will fail. Okay, you won't be creating that many number of system assigned managed identity for each and every resource you want to create. Okay, in order to overcome such scenarios, deploying the resources associated with a single user assigned identity will require the creation of only one service principal in Microsoft Entra ID, avoiding the rate limit. Using a single identity that is created in advance will also reduce the risk of replication delays that could occur if multiple resources are created, each with their own identity. Okay. So that is the advantage, that is the plus point where user assigned managed identities shine, okay, when compared to your system assigned user identities. Okay, so maintain one user managed identity. Yeah, you need to maintain one user assigned managed identity, and same user assigned managed identity can be shared across all the resources. Okay, it basically minimizes the time required to create this. If you are going with the system assigned managed identity, it will basically minimize the time which is required to create each and every resource creating its own system assigned managed identity. Okay, and also it avoids the risk of replication basically, and also the redundant roles and permissions. Okay, then replicated resources or applications. Again, the recommendation is user assigned identity. Okay, resources that carry out the same task, for example duplicated web servers or identical functionality running in an app service and in an application on a virtual machine typically require the same permissions. For example, if you are running a web server basically, okay, you are running a web server which contains n number of apis. Okay, so basically this is identical. Okay, the functionalities provided by all these apis is identical. Only thing you want is you want to run it on replicated servers. Okay, in such scenarios each and every instance which is running your web server requires same number of roles and permissions. Okay, in such cases it is recommended to go with user assigned identity. That's why they say resources that carry out the same task, for example duplicated web servers or identical functionality running in an app service and in an application on virtual machine typically require the same permission. By using the same user assigned identity, fewer role assignments are required, which reduces the management overhead. Okay, the resources don't have to be of the same type. Yes, agreed. Compliance. Okay, if your organization requires that all identity creations must go through an approval process, using a single user assigned identity across multiple resources will require fewer approvals. Okay, than the system assigned identities, because one user assigned managed identity is being shared across resources. That's why one approval is enough. But if you are going with system assigned managed identities, because system assigned managed identities are tightly coupled with the resources, if there are 100 resources for 100 basically you need to go through 100 approval process in order to activate system assigned managed identities. Okay, so this is the place where scenario compliance, where again user assigned identity shines basically. Okay, now access required before a resource is deployed, very important. System assigned managed identities are basically created when a resource is created. A system assigned managed identity is created when a Azure resource is created or when a user activates the system assigned identity. Okay, once the resource is successfully created. Okay, so some resources may require access to certain Azure resources as part of their deployment. In this case, a system assigned managed identity may not be created in time, so a pre-existing user assigned identity should be used. Okay, so this is one scenario. Again, access required before a resource is deployed. Okay, there are some permissions which needs to be in place in order to deploy that resource itself. Okay, it's a precondition. In such cases, what you need to do is you should have a user assigned managed identity. One such example is a storage account basically. Okay, in order to create an app service which runs your web server, okay, in order to create that app service, the required thing is that the user must have, or the service should have some predefined RBAC permissions, basically role based access permissions. Okay, and that needs to be set up very early. That's the precondition. In such cases you can't go with system assigned user identity where you can have, okay, so what you can do is basically you have a user assigned managed identity which have already all set up, all roles and permissions set up. Only thing you have to do is once you create that app service, you just point that particular app service to this user assigned managed identity and things will be carried out smoothly. Okay, audit logging. Audit logging is a scenario where we will use system assigned identity. If you need to log which specific resource carried out an action, okay, if you need to log which specific resource carried out an action rather than which identity, in that case you go with system assigned identity. Okay, because you are interested in the resource, not in the identity. Okay, so it's one to one, so go with system assigned identity. Okay, So permissions lifecycle management, again, system assigned managed identity is shine here. If you require that the permissions for a resource be removed along with the resource, use system assigned managed identity. As I already said, in case of system assigned managed identity, when the resource is deleted, it automatically deletes the identity also. Okay, so if you don't want that burden of managing these permissions, roles, and deletion of identity, okay, then you can go with system assigned identity in case of permissions lifecycle management. Okay, these are the scenarios I have explained, and one such good example is, for example, if you are going with the system assigned managed identity, okay, let's take an example. You have 4 virtual machines. Okay, all these 4 virtual machines must have access to a storage account and a keyword. Okay, so all these virtual machines are basically running some web server. Okay, think like that. Okay, and all these virtual machines basically need access to the storage account and keyword, and all these four of the 4 virtual machines are running the same web server. Okay, but they are replicated on multiple instances. Now if you go with system assigned managed identities, see the complexity. Each and every virtual machine has its own system assigned managed identity. Okay, and you need to provide access to storage account and keyword. What's happening over here? See, okay, for both storage account and keyword, you ended up giving two permissions. Okay, first one is for storage account, second one is for keyword. Again, same for the virtual machine, 2, 3, 4. Can you see the number of roles and permissions? In total, they are 8, right? For each and every virtual machine, you have its own system assigned managed identity, and you are providing the permissions. Okay, not a good idea, right, guys? So if you go with a user assigned managed identity, see the advantage. Very simple, because all 4 virtual machines or resources are basically wants to access the same set of resources, that is a storage account and keyword, and all are running, in my case, same web server. Okay, or have the same requirement of roles and permissions, I would say. So in that case, I will have only one user assigned managed identity, and for on that user assigned managed identity, I provide role assignment 1, which is a storage data reader, and for the keyword, I give keyword reader. Just 2 permissions compared to 8 permissions. Which one would be better? Obviously, right, guys? 2 permissions are much better to manage, basically, and also only one managed identity object, whereas compared to over here, there are 4 managed identities, system assigned managed identities. Okay, so these are the points where, because basically user assigned identities shine, and there are some limits basically associated with the managed identities. Each managed identity counts towards the object quota limit in an Azure AD tenants. Okay, this is a snapshot I have taken from the MSDN. Okay, the rate at which managed identities can be created have the following limit. Okay, the rate at which a managed identities can be created. Okay, concentrate on these words. Okay, so per Azure AD tenant, per Azure region, 400 create operations per 20 seconds. Can you see? So per Azure AD tenant and for Azure region, you can create 400 create operations for 20 seconds. Okay, so basically you can create 400 identities within 20 seconds. Okay, same way per Azure subscription, per Azure region, 80 create operations per 20 seconds. Okay, now per Azure subscription level. Okay, now per Azure subscription, per Azure region, you can perform at any instant of time, or for 20 seconds, I would say 80 create operations. Okay, now the rate at which a user assigned managed identity can be assigned with an Azure resource. Okay, per Azure AD tenant, per Azure region, 400 assignment operations per 20 seconds. Again, per Azure subscription, per Azure region, 300 assignment operation per 20 seconds. So this is the thing. These are the limits we have to keep in mind. Okay. So per 20 seconds, you can create 400 operation. You can perform 400 create operations, and at the subscription level, you can perform 80 create operation. Now, suppose you have created a ARM template, Azure Resource Manager template, in which you are trying to create, okay, for example, you are trying to create, say, 100 resources. You want to create 100 VMs, and for those 100 VMs, if you go with the system assigned managed identities, okay, you have to create 100 system assigned managed identities. Okay, now they are saying for 20 seconds you can create only 80 system assigned managed identities. Now if there are 100 VMs, then for each and every VM, if you create a system assigned managed identity, then if within 20 seconds you are not able to create those 100 VMs basically, okay, then what will happen? Basically you will receive an error, the rate quota error, right? So we need to consider all these factors, and that's why it's better to make use of user assigned managed identities, because you will create only one and you associate all the rules and permissions. Okay, so that's all about managed identities. I hope you people understood the notion over here. uh, I hope it will help you when you design authentication and authorization, and especially the collaboration between your Azure resources in your system. Okay, so always remember, make use of this kind of managed identities. Do not make use of the approach where you are basically storing the credentials in your Azure Key Vault, in your by mistakenly in your Git repository, okay, or in your configuration files. Okay, that approach is obsolete now, and that is not at all recommended. Never ever deal with credentials. Credentials are like your uranium 235. Okay, it's like a bomb. If it is compromised, it will create a hell lot of problems. So do remember this. Okay, and make use of this particular feature provided by Microsoft Entra ID or Azure Active Directory, which is ad free of cost. Thank you for listening, guys, and have a nice day.